I remember it was the middle of winter, and the cold was cutting through me in Chicago. The snow was falling heavily, covering the whole city, but I didn't care. That day, I had an important meeting with a partner named Ryan. Ryan was a big guy, a head taller than me, and must have weighed 30 pounds more. He always wore expensive suits and polished leather shoes. I heard that Ryan came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. His father was a notorious real estate mogul in New York. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on a quiet street in Brooklyn. The shop was decorated in a classic style, with abstract paintings on the walls and soft jazz music playing. The dim yellow light created a romantic, cozy atmosphere. I arrived about 15 minutes early. When Ryan walked in, I could already see the difference. Ryan was wearing a designer coat and shiny leather shoes. As for me, an ordinary tailor, I was wearing a worn-out old coat and a pair of sneakers with worn-down heels. Ryan started talking about his recent projects. He boasted about huge profits and the luxurious apartments he had just bought in Miami. He spoke with a lot of confidence, his tone full of arrogance. I just sat there in silence, listening, occasionally nodding to show I agreed. I didn't want to ruin his mood. After hearing Ryan boast for a while, I finally started talking about my project. I gave him specific numbers and promising forecasts. But Ryan wasn't interested. He kept talking about his own successes. I started to feel disappointed. I had prepared very carefully for this meeting, but it seemed to be useless. However, I still tried to persuade Ryan. I told him that this project had huge potential for growth, that we could make millions of dollars. Ryan suddenly went quiet. He stared at me, his eyes full of scrutiny. I started to feel anxious. Had I said something wrong? Or had Ryan seen the disappointment in my eyes? After a moment of silence, Ryan suddenly stood up. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, and then turned and walked away. I sat there, utterly disappointed. I had believed that this project could change my life, but everything had fallen apart. I stood up and walked out of the coffee shop. The cold wind hit my face, making me feel more alert. I decided I wouldn't give up. I would find another partner. I believed that my project would be a success. A week later, I got a call from Ryan. He told me that he had thought about it carefully and wanted to invest in my project. I was very surprised, but I still agreed. He said that he was impressed with my determination, that he saw an ambitious person in me, someone who never gave up. I partnered with Ryan, and our project was a huge success. We made millions of dollars. Ryan is still an arrogant guy, but he has become a good friend of mine. We often hang out and talk. He still teases me about my worn-out old coat and my sneakers with worn-down heels. But I don't mind. I know he's only teasing me because he's fond of me. That meeting changed my life. It not only brought me financial success, but also helped me find a true friend. I am no longer just an ordinary tailor. I have become a successful businessman. But I still keep my worn-out old coat and my worn-down sneakers. I want to keep them to remind myself of who I used to be and to appreciate what I have now. I arrived at the restaurant an hour early. It was a stupid mistake, a mix-up with the time I wrote down in my planner. But that mistake saved my life. Or rather, it gave it back to me. When I pushed open the door of the private room my daughter had reserved for her engagement dinner, I heard voices. I immediately recognized the laugh of my daughter, Lauren, that one I had heard since she was a baby. She was in there, with her fiancé, Stephen. They were talking about me. And what I heard in the next 10 minutes destroyed 38 years of my life. I stood frozen behind that half-open door, in my burgundy dress and my freshly polished shoes, while my only daughter planned to erase me from her existence as if I were trash that she needed to get rid of before starting her new life. They said I was an embarrassment, a problem to solve, a pathetic old woman they had to hide away in some nursing home far from the city so I wouldn't ruin her reputation in front of Stephen's rich family. They talked about taking my house, my savings, everything I had. Lauren laughed when Stephen asked if I would suspect anything. She said no, that I was too dumb, too naive, too trusting to realize anything. In that moment, something inside me broke, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't go in to confront them. I silently walked away, left the restaurant without anyone seeing me, and as I walked the streets with tears streaming down my cheeks, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to beg for their love. I wasn't going to plead with them to treat me with dignity. I was going to do something much better. I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. But first, let me tell you how I got to this point. How a mother who gave everything for her daughter ended up listening in on that same daughter, planning to destroy her. There are moments in life that change you forever. Moments when the ground disappears from under your feet and everything you believed in crumbles in a matter of seconds. For me, that moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when I mixed up the time for Lauren's engagement dinner and arrived 60 minutes early. 60 minutes that would change everything. The restaurant was almost empty when I went in. Only a few waiters were setting the tables, precisely folding white napkins and arranging crystal glasses that glittered under the ceiling lights. The air smelled of fresh flowers and freshly baked bread. Everything was perfect, elegant, exactly as Lauren had been planning for months. I am 69 years old. I've been a widow for 11 years. All my life I believed that a mother's love was unbreakable, unquestionable, eternal. I believed that the sacrifices I made had a purpose. I believed my daughter loved me as much as I loved her. That afternoon I found out I was completely wrong. I went to the reception stand, but no one was there. I heard voices coming from the private room at the back of the restaurant, the one Lauren had reserved for the dinner. I recognized her laugh immediately. That crystal clear laugh I had heard since she was a baby, the same one that used to fill our small house when she was a little girl, running through the yard, chasing butterflies. I walked toward it with a smile on my lips, ready to surprise her, to hug her, to tell her how proud I was of her. My only daughter was getting married. Lauren, my little girl, the reason I breathed, was about to start a new chapter with Stephen Grant, that man from a wealthy family who looked at her as if she were the most valuable thing in the world. Oh, so I thought. But when I got close to the half-open door of the room, I stopped. Something in the tone of her voice made me pause. It wasn't the sweet Lauren I knew. It was someone else. Stephen was with her. I heard his deep voice, the one that had always seemed so polite and respectful to me. They were speaking softly, but the empty room amplified every word as if they were inches from my ear. What I heard in the next few minutes changed my life forever. Stephen asked something about the seating arrangement for the tables, about where I would be sitting Jing's. The dinner. Lauren sighed, a tired, annoyed sigh, as if talking about me was an exhausting task. Then she said something I will never forget. She said I was a problem that she needed to solve soon, that she couldn't let me ruin her new life, that Stephen and his family were important people, with connections, with a reputation, and that I, with my cheap dresses and my country manners, was an embarrassment. I stood frozen. My hand was trembling on the wooden doorframe. I felt my heart stop. The air escaped my lungs, the world spinning too fast, and I couldn't keep my balance. Stephen laughed. A soft, conspiratorial laugh. He said that he understood perfectly. That after the wedding, once they were settled in their new house, they would look for a place where I could be more comfortable. A nursing home, maybe, or some residence far from the city where I could live peacefully without bothering anyone. Lauren agreed. She said it was for the best for everyone, that I was already getting old, that I needed care she couldn't give me, that it was time to think about her future and stop carrying responsibilities from the past. Responsibilities from the past. That's what my own daughter called me. As if the 38 years I dedicated to her were just dead weight that she now had to abandon in some forgotten corner. The sleepless nights when she was sick, the cleaning jobs I did to pay for her college, the endless sacrifices so she would never lack for anything. All of that was just a responsibility from the past now. Stephen mentioned money. He asked if I had any savings, any property. Lauren replied that the house we lived in was still in my name, but that she was working on it. That after the wedding, she would get me to sign some papers. She would convince me that it was best to sell and that she would manage the money for me. For my own good, of course. I listened to them, planning to take everything I had. The house that my late husband and I bought with so much effort, the savings I had put away for decades, thinking that one day they would serve to help my daughter if she needed it. I listened to my own daughter, the child I carried in my womb, who I fed with my body, who I protected with my life, planning to rob me, hide me, erase me from her existence as if I had never mattered. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when Stephen asked if I would suspect anything, if I would realize their intentions. Lauren laughed again. That laugh that I loved so much now sounded cruel, heartless. She said no, that I was too naive, too trusting, too dumb to see what was happening right under my nose, that I had always been like that for years she had pretended to love me only because it was convenient for her, because she needed my support, my money, my house, but that she didn't need me anymore. Now she had Stephen. Now she had a better life waiting for her. She said that I was a pathetic old woman who lived in the past, clinging to memories of when she was a child, unable to understand that people change, that relationships have an expiration date, that a mother's love doesn't mean eternal slavery. In that moment, something inside me broke into 1,000 pieces, but not in the way you would expect. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't go into the room to confront them. I stayed there, motionless, listening to every poisonous word coming out of the mouth of the person I loved most in this world. And as I listened, I felt something new being born inside me. Something cold, something calculating, something I had never experienced before. Rage. Not the explosive rage that makes you scream and break things. This was different. It was a silent rage, patient, intelligent. It was the rage of a woman who had just woken up after decades of deep sleep. I walked away from that door without making a sound. I left the restaurant with the same care with which I had entered. No one saw me arrive. No one saw me leave. I walked the streets as the sun began to hide behind the buildings. The tears ran down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them. I let them fall freely while my mind worked at full speed, processing what I had just heard. For 69 years, I had been an obedient woman, a devoted wife, a sacrificing mother. I always put others first. I always swallowed my own desires, my own dreams, my own needs, for the good of my family. And this is how they paid me back. But that afternoon, walking alone on those streets that suddenly seemed strange to me, I made a decision that would change everything forever. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. I wasn't going to beg them to love me. I wasn't going to be the pathetic victim they expected me to be. I was going to do something much better. I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. When I returned home that night, I was no longer the same person who had left hours earlier. I still smiled when Lauren called to confirm that I would be attending the dinner the next day. I still used that sweet and maternal tone she expected to hear. I still pretended to be the naive and trusting mother they thought I was. But on the inside, I had already begun to plan every detail of my revenge. They didn't know it yet, but that conversation I overheard wasn't my end. It was my beginning. The engagement dinner would be in 24 hours, and I would be there, smiling, toasting to their happiness. But this time, Mum, the fool, would have the last word. My name is Sarah Miller. I am 69 years old. I am a widow, mother of one daughter, and all my life I believed that love conquers all. That if you give yourself completely, if you give everything without expecting anything in return, you will be rewarded with true love. I believed in that with every fiber of my being, until I discovered I was living a lie. But to understand how I got to that devastating moment in the restaurant, I need to take you back to the past. I need you to know who I was before I became the invisible old woman my daughter described with so much contempt. I met my husband, Robert, when I was just 20 years old. I was working as a secretary in a small office downtown. I earned very little, but it was enough to help my mother. He was a mechanic. His hands were always stained with grease, but his eyes were the kindest I had ever seen in my life. We got married a year later, in a simple ceremony with barely 20 guests. We didn't have money for anything big, but we didn't care. We had love, and back then, that seemed like enough. For 5 years we tried to have children. 5 years of broken hopes, of medical tests, of silent crying in the bathroom while Robert hugged me and told me that everything would be okay. The doctors said it was almost impossible, that we should accept that we might never be parents. And then Lauren came. When the doctor confirmed my pregnancy, I cried for 3 days straight. From happiness, from disbelief, from pure terror that something could go wrong. Robert sold his motorcycle, the one he loved so much, to pay for the prenatal appointments. He worked double shifts for months to make sure I could rest, that I wouldn't lack for anything, that our baby would have everything it needed. Lauren was born on a Tuesday in September. She weighed exactly 7 pounds. She had Robert's eyes and my small nose. When they placed her in my arms for the first time, I swore I would do everything I could to make her happy, that she would never lack love, protection, opportunities, that I would be a better mother than mine was to me. And I kept that promise, maybe too well. The first years were tough, but beautiful. Robert worked long hours at the mechanic shop. I quit my job to take care of Lauren full-time. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, with a tiny yard where Lauren learned to walk, to run, to laugh. We didn't have luxuries, but we had what was important. We had a family. Lauren was a brilliant, intelligent, curious child, always asking questions about everything. At school, she got the best grades. The teachers told me she had a promising future, that with a good education she could go very far, and I held on to that idea as if it were a life preserver. I wanted my daughter to have everything I never had: opportunities, education, a better future. So when Lauren turned 12 and started showing interest in private schools, Robert and I made a decision. He would work even more hours. I would look for a part-time job. We would do whatever it took to pay for that school my daughter wanted so much. I got a job cleaning houses. 3 times a week I went to clean the mansions of rich people who lived on the other side of the city. I scrubbed floors, washed bathrooms, ironed clothes, while I thought about Lauren studying in her new uniform, surrounded by kids from well-off families, learning things I had never had the chance to learn. Every backache, every sore knee, every moment of extreme tiredness was worth it. Because my daughter was happy. Because she was building the future I had always dreamed of for her. But something started to change in Lauren when she went to that school. At first, it was small things. She stopped inviting her friends over to our house. She said our house was too small, that she would feel uncomfortable. She started asking for brand-name clothes, expensive shoes, things we could barely afford. But we made the effort to buy because we didn't want her to feel less than her classmates. Then the lies started. Small ones at first. She told her friends that her father owned the mechanic shop, not just an employee. That I was a stay-at-home mum by choice, not because I had to clean other people's houses to pay her tuition. She made up stories about vacations we had never taken, about a life we didn't have. When I confronted her, when I asked her why she was lying, she looked at me with those eyes that used to be so sweet and said something that I should have taken as a warning. She said she wanted to fit in, that her friends came from important families and she couldn't be the poor one in the group, that if I really loved her, I would understand. And I did understand, or at least I thought I did. I thought it was just a phase, something normal in a teenager trying to find their place in the world. I thought that with time she would learn to appreciate where she came from, to be proud of her parents who worked their butts off to give her everything. I was wrong. Robert died when Lauren was 18 years old, a massive heart attack while he was working under a car. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. I didn't even get to say goodbye to him. One day he was here, the next day he was gone forever. I thought Lauren and I would grow closer after his death, that we would share that pain, that we would hold on to each other as the family we were. But it didn't happen that way. Lauren was about to start college. She was more worried about her future than about grieving her father. I used Robert's life insurance to pay for her first year of college. It was a modest amount, barely enough, but it was what Robert would have wanted. I kept cleaning houses to cover the rest of her expenses. Lauren studied business administration at a prestigious private university. I was living on $300 a month, barely enough for food and basic utilities. But I didn't care. My daughter was building her future. During those 4 years of college, Lauren almost never came home. She always had excuses: projects, group work, extracurricular activities. When she did come, she would only stay a few hours before making up some reason to leave. I would cook her favorite dishes, clean her room even though she didn't use it anymore, and eagerly awaited each of her brief visits as if they were precious gifts. After she graduated, she got a good job at a big company. She started earning more money than Robert and I had earned together in our entire lives. I thought I could finally rest, that maybe she would want to help me, give me back even a little of everything I had invested in her. But Lauren had other plans. She moved into a fancy apartment downtown. She started dressing in expensive clothes, frequenting restaurants where a single meal cost more than my weekly budget. And I was still cleaning houses, now in my 60s, with my knees shot and my back protesting every morning when I got up. I never asked her for money. I never demanded anything. I just wanted her to visit me once in a while, to share even one afternoon a month with me. But even that seemed too much to ask of her. It was around that time that she met Stephen. She introduced him to me just 3 months after they started dating. Tall, handsome, well-dressed, with that perfect smile that men who are used to getting what they want have. He came from a wealthy family, owners of several properties in the city. Lauren looked at him as if he were her ticket to a better world. And I guess he was. When Stephen entered Lauren's life, I still had hope. I thought that maybe love would soften her, that forming her own family would make her understand everything I had done for her, that she would finally see my sacrifice with different eyes. But what came next was worse than I ever imagined. Stephen would visit us occasionally. He was always polite, always smiling, always saying the right things. But I noticed how he looked at our house. That quick and discreet look that scanned the peeling walls, the old furniture, the worn floor. I noticed how he sat on the edge of the couch, as if he was afraid of getting dirty, as if everything he touched in my house could be contagious. Lauren behaved differently when he was around. Her laugh was more forced, her words more careful. She introduced me as her mother, of course, but there was something in her tone that made me feel small, as if she were doing me a favor by acknowledging our kinship. One day, Stephen asked for family photos. He wanted to know our story, he said. Lauren got tense. I, naive as always, took out the old albums that I kept so lovingly. Photos of when she was a baby, of her birthdays, of Robert smiling in his mechanic uniform, of our few vacations to nearby beaches where we camped because we couldn't afford hotels. Stephen looked at them with that polite smile pasted on his face. He made appropriate comments. What a nice family, what good memories. But his eyes told another story. He saw poverty, he saw mediocrity. He saw exactly what Lauren had spent years trying to hide. After that visit, Lauren began to distance herself even more. Her phone calls became shorter, more spaced out. When I invited her to dinner, she always had something more important to do. Work meetings, social engagements, a busy life that apparently had no room for her mother. 6 months passed before I saw her in person again. 6 months in which I lived waiting for a call, a text, any sign that she still cared. When she finally showed up, she had news. Stephen had proposed to her. They would get married in 6 months. There would be a big wedding, 200 guests, at the most exclusive hotel in the city. She hugged me when she told me, but it was a cold, mechanical hug, the kind of hug you give out of obligation and not real affection. I cried with happiness. My little girl was going to get married. But even as I cried, I felt something strange in my chest, an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't identify. Lauren explained the wedding plans to me. Everything sounded incredibly expensive, impossibly elegant. I asked her if she needed help, if there was anything I could do. She looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was a mix of pity and almost amusement. She told me not to worry, that Stephen and his family would cover all the expenses, that I just had to show up on the wedding day and enjoy myself. Then came the part that broke my heart. She told me that she had hired someone to help me choose an appropriate dress for the wedding. Appropriate. That word hung in the air like poison. She said that the wedding would be a high-profile event, that there would be important people, photographers, even some social media journalists, that I needed to look presentable. Presentable. As if I normally wasn't. I agreed because I didn't know what else to do. A week later, an elegant woman with too much makeup showed up at my door. She took me to stores where the dresses cost more than my rent for 3 months. She made me try on dozens of options while looking at me with that critical expression that people who are used to judging use. Finally, she chose a dark grey, simple, almost invisible dress. Perfect for going unnoticed, she said. They didn't let me choose. They didn't ask me what I liked. They just dressed me like a doll and sent me back home. The following months were a blur of preparations that I was not a part of. Lauren called me occasionally to inform me of details, but never to ask for my opinion. The cake tasting, the flower selection, the music. Everything was decided without me. I was just another name on the guest list, a family obligation that they had to fulfill. But I told myself I was being dramatic, that brides are always stressed, that after the wedding everything would go back to normal. That maybe when Lauren settled down, when she started her own family, she would value me more. Maybe when she had her own children, she would understand what a mother's love means. I clung to that hope like a fool. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lauren showed up at my house unannounced. She had papers. She said she needed me to sign some documents. Boring legal stuff, she explained with a smile. Things related to her change in marital status, with updates to family information that the banks required. The papers were full of legal terms I barely understood. Lauren hurried me, said she was in a rush, that her lawyer was waiting for the signed documents. I picked up the pen, ready to sign where she indicated. But something stopped me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way Lauren avoided my gaze. Maybe it was simply that after 69 years of being naive, something inside me finally woke up. I told her I wanted to read the documents calmly, that I would review them carefully and return them signed the next day. Lauren got annoyed. She said it was unnecessary, that they were just formalities. But I stood firm. For the first time in years, I told my daughter no. She left furious, with the unsigned papers in her hand. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, reading every word of those documents. I didn't understand everything. The legal language was complicated, but I understood enough. What Lauren wanted me to sign was a power of attorney that gave her total control over my finances and properties. Basically, I would be handing over my house, my savings, everything I had. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. My own daughter was trying to rob me. And the worst part was that she was doing it with a smile, with sweet lies, expecting me to be too dumb to realize it. The next day, I returned the unsigned papers to her. I told her I had consulted with an acquaintance who understood about laws, and that he had advised me not to sign anything without fully understanding the implications. Lauren turned pale. Then she turned red with anger. She accused me of not trusting her, of ruining her plans, of being a paranoid and distrustful old woman. She cried. She said she was only trying to help me, to protect me, to make sure I was well taken care of when I was older. That Stephen and she had planned to use my house as collateral for a business loan that would change their lives. That I could still live there, of course, but that legally the property would have to be in their name. For a moment, she almost convinced me. I almost believed her tears. I almost signed those damn papers just to see her smile again. But I didn't. For the first time in my life, I set boundaries. I told her no, that my house was the only thing I had, the only legacy Robert left me, and that I wouldn't give it up. Not even to her. Lauren left my house that day without saying goodbye. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence that ate me up inside. I wondered if I had done the right thing, if I was being selfish, if I was really ruining my daughter's life by clinging to an old house. But then, a week before the wedding, I received the invitation to the engagement dinner. An intimate event, the card said. Just close family and the wedding party, at the most elegant restaurant in the city, on a Tuesday afternoon at 7 o'clock. Lauren called to confirm my attendance. Her voice sounded cold, distant, but polite, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't asked me to hand over everything I had. She told me it was important that I attend, that Stephen's family would be there, and they wanted to get to know me better. I accepted, of course, because despite everything, despite the pain and the disappointment, she was still my daughter. And I was still that foolish mother who believed that love could fix anything. I marked the date on my calendar. Tuesday, 7 o'clock in the evening. But I wrote 6 by mistake, a stupid mistake that would change everything. When that Tuesday came, I got ready carefully. I put on my best dress, the burgundy one I had bought on sale. I put on a little makeup, something I almost never did. I styled my hair with care. I wanted to look good for Lauren, for her future husband, for his family. I wanted to show them that I could also be presentable, that I could fit into their elegant world, even if it was just for one night. I left the house an hour early. I always arrived early for everything. It was a habit Robert had instilled in me. But when I got to the restaurant and looked at my watch, I realized my mistake. It wasn't 7 o'clock. It was 6 o'clock. I had arrived an hour early. I thought about leaving, about walking around and coming back at the right time. But it was cold outside, and my new shoes were hurting my feet. I decided to go into the restaurant, maybe order a coffee, and wait in a discreet corner until the rest of the guests arrived. That decision, that insignificant moment, was the turning point of my life. Because when I entered that elegant restaurant, when I heard the voices coming from the private room, when I got closer and recognized my daughter's laugh, I didn't know that I was about to hear the most painful truth of my existence. I didn't know that in the next 10 minutes, my entire world would fall to pieces. And I didn't know that those broken pieces would become the weapons I would use to rebuild myself. I left the restaurant like a ghost. No one saw me enter. No one saw me leave. I walked the streets aimlessly while the sun was setting and the city lights began to turn on one by one. The tears ran down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I needed to feel that pain. I needed it to be real, because part of me still couldn't believe it. Part of me was still hoping to wake up from this nightmare and discover that it had all been a misunderstanding, that my daughter hadn't said those horrible things about me, that she hadn't planned to rob me, hide me, erase me from her life as if I were garbage. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real as the cold night air, as the pain in my feet from the new shoes, as the immense emptiness I felt in my chest. I got home after 9 o'clock at night. The house was dark, empty, exactly as my life suddenly seemed to be. I sat on the sofa where Robert used to watch television on Sundays, where Lauren used to do her homework when she was a little girl, where we had been a family, or at least that's what I thought. My phone rang. It was Lauren. For a moment I considered not answering, to let it ring until she gave up. But I answered, because I was still that mother conditioned to respond when her daughter called. Her voice sounded worried. She said that she had been waiting for me at the restaurant, that I never showed up for dinner, that she had called several times, but I hadn't answered. Was everything okay? Had I had some problem? I lied. I told her that I had felt sick during the afternoon, a stomachache. Nothing serious, but I didn't feel strong enough to go to the restaurant. I apologized for not having called sooner. My voice sounded calm, almost normal. Years of swallowing pain had taught me to pretend very well. Lauren seemed relieved. She said not to worry, that she understood perfectly, that the wedding was in less than a week and she would see me there, to take care of myself and rest. Her voice sounded sweet, worried, exactly like the voice of a daughter who loves her mother. But I already knew the truth. When I hung up the phone, something inside me changed for good. There was nothing left of the naive Sarah who had entered that restaurant hours earlier. That woman had died the moment she heard her daughter call her pathetic. What was left was someone new, someone cold, someone who had finally opened her eyes. I stayed sitting on that couch until 4 in the morning thinking, analyzing every detail of the last few years, every sign I had ignored, every moment when Lauren had used me, manipulated me, subtly humiliated me, and I had found excuses to justify her. the papers she wanted me to sign, her increasingly spaced out visits, the way she introduced me to Stephen, as if I were an embarrassing burden. Everything made sense now. Everything was part of the same plan, to get rid of me. But I wasn't going to allow it. Not like that. Not without a fight. At 5 in the morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to cry or beg. I wasn't going to be the victim they expected me to be. I was going to be smart, strategic, patient. I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. The first thing I did was call my only close friend, Stephanie. I had met her years ago when we were cleaning houses together. She had retired 2 years earlier, but we had stayed in touch. She was one of the few people in my life I could trust. I told her everything. Every word I had heard in that restaurant. Every detail of Lauren's plan to get my house. Stephanie was horrified. She cried with me. She hugged me. And then she said something I will never forget. She said it was time for me to think about myself for the first time in my life. That 69 years was too long to be someone else's doormat, even if that someone was my own daughter. Stephanie helped me find a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in family law and asset protection. Someone who would understand my situation and know how to protect me legally. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of attorney Samuel Johnson, a man in his 50s, serious, with thick glasses and an expression that inspired confidence. I told him my story. I showed him the papers that Lauren had wanted me to sign. I explained the situation. Samuel listened in silence. When I finished, he sighed deeply. He told me he had seen similar cases many times. Adult children who abused elderly parents, emotionally manipulating them to take their properties. It was more common than I imagined. Then he explained my options. I could make a new will immediately, excluding Lauren from any inheritance. I could put the house in a trust that would protect me from any attempt to dispossess me. I could document everything to have legal support if the situation escalated. But there was something else I could do, something that Samuel suggested carefully, measuring every word. I could gather evidence of Lauren's intentions, record conversations, document her attempts at manipulation, build a case that would not only protect me legally, but also publicly expose what she was doing. He explained that for that I would need time, patience, the coldness to keep pretending normalcy while I gathered evidence. He asked me if I was ready for that, if I had the strength to act as if nothing had changed while I planned my defense. I looked him straight in the eyes and told him yes, that I was more than ready, that I had spent 69 years being weak, and now it was time to be strong. Samuel smiled for the first time since I had entered his office. He told me he would help me, that we would do this right, that when we were finished, Lauren wouldn't be able to touch a single dime of what was mine. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret activity. I signed documents. I transferred the house to an irrevocable trust where I was the sole beneficiary. I updated my will, leaving everything to a foundation that helps elderly women who are victims of family abuse instead of to Lauren. I took all the money out of my bank accounts and put it in a new account that my daughter didn't know about. Every night I reviewed the documents. I memorized every detail of the plan. During the day, I acted normal. I called Lauren, asked about the wedding preparations, pretended to be excited for her big day. My voice sounded sweet and maternal as always. But inside, I was pure ice. Lauren didn't suspect a thing. She continued to treat me with that mix of condescension and false affection. She kept making plans for her perfect future, where I didn't exist except as a solved problem, hidden away in some nursing home far from her new glamorous life. 3 days before the wedding, Samuel called me to his office. He had a proposal. He had been thinking about my case and believed that I deserved more than just legal protection. I deserved justice. I deserved for Lauren and Stephen to know that they couldn't just use and discard people without consequences. He suggested something I had never considered: to publicly expose what they had planned to do, not in a courtroom where no one but us would know, but in front of all the people they wanted so much to impress. In front of Stephen's family, in front of the wedding guests, in front of the social world they so longed to belong to. The idea terrified and excited me at the same time. It meant public confrontation. It meant a definitive break with Lauren. It meant there would be no going back. But as I thought about those words I had heard in the restaurant, about how my daughter had called me pathetic, about how they had planned to steal everything I had, I knew there was no going back anyway. That relationship was already broken. It was just that Lauren didn't know it yet. I told Samuel yes, that I wanted to do it, that I wanted everyone to know the truth. And so we began to plan the exact moment, the perfect place, the most effective way to reveal the true nature of my beloved daughter. The wedding would be the perfect stage. The 3 days before the wedding were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was the excited mother getting ready for her daughter's big day. On the inside, I was a cold strategist, calculating every move of my revenge. Samuel and I met several times at his office. Each meeting lasted for hours. We went over the plan again and again, looking for any flaw, any detail that could go wrong. We couldn't afford to make mistakes. This had to be perfect. The plan was simple, but devastating. During the wedding reception, at the time of the speeches, when all the guests were present and attentive, I would take the microphone. Not to give the typical emotional speech of a proud mother, but to reveal the truth about Lauren and Stephen. Samuel had prepared all the evidence. Copies of the documents Lauren had wanted me to sign, with legal analysis clearly showing they were an attempt to dispossess me of my assets. Bank statements showing how I had spent my last savings on her education, while she earned 5 times more than me and never helped me with a single dollar. Emails between Lauren and Stephen, where they discussed what to do with me after the wedding. But the most important piece of evidence was something I would have to get personally: a recording. Samuel explained that we needed Lauren to say out loud, in her own words, what she really thought of me. We needed her to incriminate herself. He gave me a small recording device, no bigger than a matchbox. He showed me how to use it, how to hide it, how to make sure it captured everything clearly. I felt like I was in a spy movie, except this was painfully real. The night before the wedding, I called Lauren. I told her I needed to see her, that there was something important I wanted to give her before her big day, something special I had saved for years waiting for this moment. Lauren hesitated. She said she was incredibly busy with the final preparations. But when I mentioned that it was her grandmother's jewelry that Robert had inherited from his mother, and that I had saved for this moment, her tone changed immediately. Of course she would come. She would stop by my house in an hour. There was no jewelry, there never was. It was a lie to lure her, but I knew Lauren wouldn't be able to resist. She had always liked valuable things, possessions she could show off, that could increase her status. As I waited for her arrival, I prepared everything carefully. I hid the recording device in the pocket of my apron. I made coffee and cookies, as I always did when she visited. I acted like the loving mother she expected to find. Lauren arrived exactly an hour later. She was wearing an incredibly expensive cream-colored dress, her hair perfectly styled, her nails freshly done. She looked radiant, happy, ready for her big day. She looked like someone whose life was about to become perfect. She had no idea what was coming. I greeted her with a smile. I hugged her like always. I offered her coffee, which she refused, saying she was trying not to have caffeine before the wedding. She sat on the edge of the couch, just like Stephen used to do, as if the furniture would get her dirty. I told her the jewelry was in my bedroom. At first I wanted to talk to her for a moment, mother and daughter, before everything changed. Lauren sighed. That sigh that I knew so well. The sigh of someone who has more important things to do, but is obligated to be polite. She told me she had little time, that she was expected at the hotel for the rehearsal dinner with the wedding party. Perfect. She was in a hurry. People in a hurry let their guard down. They say things they wouldn't normally say. I started by talking about her father, about how proud he would be to see her get married, about how he had worked himself to death to give her everything she needed, about how his last wish was for me to always take care of her. Lauren nodded distractedly, looking at her phone every few seconds. Then I mentioned the house. I said I had been thinking a lot lately, that this house was too big for me alone, that maybe she was right when she suggested that I sell it and move to a smaller place. That got her attention. She put down her phone and looked at me directly for the first time since she had arrived. I told her that I had been considering her advice, that maybe I really did need help managing my money, my properties, that maybe she and Stephen had better ideas about what to do with all of it. Lauren's eyes glittered. It was the look of a predator who had just seen her prey weaken. She smiled, that sweet smile she had perfected for years to manipulate me. She told me that she was so happy to hear that she had been worried about me, that at my age it was hard to handle so many responsibilities, that she only wanted the best for me, that after the wedding, when she returned from her honeymoon, we would sit down calmly and review everything, to do what was best for my future. I nodded. I acted relieved. I acted like the confused old woman she expected me to be. Then I asked her directly what exactly she and Stephen had planned for me. I wanted to understand it well. I wanted to know what my life would be like after they took over everything. Lauren relaxed completely. She thought she had convinced me, that I had finally given up. She started talking more freely. She explained to me that the best thing would be to sell the house, that the money would be invested in the business Stephen was planning to start, a consulting company that required initial capital. Of course, I would receive dividends when the business was successful. I shouldn't worry about that. I asked her where I would live if we sold the house. Lauren paused. Then she said they had been looking into some really nice residences, places where there were people my age, where I would have company, activities, medical care available. She said I would be much happier there than alone in this old house full of sad memories. I asked her if these residences were close by, if I could visit them often. Another pause. Longer this time. Lauren avoided my gaze. She said that the best options were on the outskirts of the city, some even in another state, but that it didn't matter because she would visit me when she could, and we could always talk on the phone. I felt the recording device in my pocket capturing every word, every lie wrapped in fake concern. Then I asked the most important question, the one I needed her to answer with total clarity. I asked her if she really believed that I needed to be in a residence, if she really thought that I couldn't take care of myself anymore, or if there were other reasons. Lauren got tense. I could see the calculation in her eyes. How much could she say without sounding cruel? How much of the truth could she reveal, without breaking the illusion of being the worried daughter? She finally spoke. She said it wasn't just for me. It was for them too, that Stephen and she were starting a new life, a life that required a certain image, certain social expectations, that Stephen's family moved in very specific circles, circles where appearances mattered. I asked her what I had to do with their social circles. Lauren sighed. That sigh of frustration from someone who has to explain something obvious. She said that I didn't understand how that world worked, that people judge, that when they met Stephen and his family, they saw our house, my clothes, the way I talked. They made comments. Nothing bad, she quickly clarified. Just observations about the differences between our families. She said that she couldn't keep introducing me as her mother without it affecting how they saw her, without them associating her with poverty, with a low class, with everything she had worked so hard to leave behind. There it was, the truth finally coming out of her mouth. I was an embarrassment, an embarrassing reminder of where she came from, an obstacle to the life she wanted to build. I asked her if she had ever really loved me, if any of those hugs, those sweet words, those promises of always being together had been true. Lauren looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was a mix of impatience and something that almost looked like pity. She said that of course she loved me, in her own way, but that love has its limits, that I couldn't expect her to sacrifice her future to maintain a relationship that had already served its purpose, that she had needed me when she was a child, when she was in school, when she was building her career. But now it was different. Now she had her own life, and that life didn't have room for me. Every word was a blow. But I kept my face serene. I kept up the act. The resigned mother who finally understood her place. I told her that I understood, that maybe she was right, that maybe it was time for each of us to go our separate ways. Lauren seemed relieved. She took my hand. She told me that she loved me, that this was for the best for both of us, that one day I would understand. Then she asked about the jewelry. I told her that I would look for it after the wedding, that I wanted her to focus on her big day without any worries. Lauren seemed disappointed, but she nodded. She got up to leave. Before she went out, I hugged her. Hard, like I used to when she was a child. She became stiff in my arms, but she didn't pull away. I whispered in her ear that I loved her, that I would always love her, no matter what. And it was true. Despite everything, despite the devastating pain, a part of me would always love that little girl who was once my entire world. But that didn't mean I would forgive her. The wedding day dawned clear and sunny, one of those perfect days that looks like it's from a magazine, the kind of day every bride dreams of. Ironic, I thought as I got dressed in front of my bedroom mirror. The most beautiful day for what would be Lauren's worst nightmare. I put on the grey dress they had chosen for me, that dress designed to make me invisible, to make me go unnoticed among the elegant guests. I put on makeup carefully. I styled my hair exactly as I had been told. On the outside, I was the obedient mother playing her part. On the inside, I was a completely different person. In my purse, I was carrying more than just lipstick and tissues. I was carrying a copy of all the documents Samuel had prepared. I was carrying the device with the recording of my conversation with Lauren from the night before. I was carrying the keys to my new life, though no one knew it yet. Samuel had called me early that morning to go over the plan one last time. He asked me if I was sure, if I really wanted to do this. I told him that I had never been more sure of anything in my life. He wished me luck and reminded me that he would be among the guests, discreetly located near the speech area, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The ceremony would be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at a historic church downtown. The reception would begin at 6 o'clock at the most exclusive hotel in the city. All paid for by Stephen's family, of course. 200 guests, a live orchestra, a 7-course dinner. The kind of wedding that costs more than I earned in my entire life working. I arrived at the church an hour early. Lauren was already there with her bridesmaids, all girls from wealthy families who looked at her as if she were a queen. When she saw me, her smile was brief and tense. She greeted me with a cold kiss on the cheek and then showed me where I was supposed to sit. First row on the bride's side, they told me, the place of honor for the mother. But I didn't feel honored. I felt like a prop, something that had to be there because protocol dictated it, but that everyone expected to remain quiet and still. I sat on that polished wooden pew and watched as the rest of the guests began to arrive. I recognized a few neighbors from our old neighborhood, people who had known us since Lauren was a child. But most were strangers. Elegant people in expensive clothes and expressions of bored superiority. The world Lauren had wanted so much to belong to. Stephen's family occupied the entire other side of the church. His parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. A complete dynasty of people accustomed to money and power. They looked at me out of the corner of their eyes with barely concealed curiosity. The poor mother of the bride, the anomaly in this perfect event. The ceremony began punctually at 4 o'clock. Lauren entered on the arm of her groomsman, a distant uncle she barely knew, but who had the appropriate social status. Robert should have been the one to walk her down the aisle. But Robert had been dead for 11 years, having worked himself to death to give this ungrateful daughter everything she wanted. Lauren looked beautiful. I couldn't deny it. Her dress was a work of art. Thousands of dollars in fabric and lace. Her face radiant with happiness. Stephen was waiting for her at the altar, with that perfect smile he had perfected. The golden couple, the bright future. If only they knew what was coming. The ceremony was long and traditional. The priest talked about love, commitment, family. Every word sounded hollow to me. They talked about uniting two families as if I were part of that equation. But I knew the truth. I was the embarrassing secret they planned to hide as soon as this theatre was over. When the priest asked if anyone had any objections to this union, there was a tense silence. For a moment, I considered getting up, to shout the truth right there in front of everyone. But I held back. It wasn't the right time yet. I had to wait. I had to be strategic. They were pronounced husband and wife. They kissed. Everyone applauded. I also applauded, with numb hands and a frozen smile on my face. They left the church under a shower of rice and petals. The photographers captured every moment. The perfect happiness, preserved forever in images that one day Lauren would look at and remember as the last day before everything fell apart. At the hotel, the reception was set up like a dream. Tables decorated with flowers that cost more than my monthly rent. Crystal glasses sparkling under huge chandeliers. A dance floor with a marble floor. A stage for the orchestra, and another smaller one for the speeches. That small stage. That was where everything would change. They seated me at a table near the front, but not at the main table. Lauren and Stephen presided over that table, along with their wedding party and his parents. I was with distant cousins and acquaintances who barely spoke to me. I was invisible even while present. Dinner was served, 7 courses as they promised, each dish more elaborate than the last. Food I didn't recognize, presented as art. The people around me were eating and conversing animatedly. I barely took a bite. The knot in my stomach left no room for food. Samuel was 3 tables behind me. Our eyes met once and he nodded slightly. Everything was still going according to plan. After dinner came the dance. First the newlyweds, alone under the spotlights. Then the parents joined in. Stephen's father danced with Lauren. His mother danced with Stephen. It was the traditional moment where I should have danced with my son-in-law. But no one invited me. No one looked for me. I stayed seated at my table watching as everyone else enjoyed themselves while I was completely ignored. It was as if I already didn't exist, as if their plan to erase me had already begun. Then came the toasts. The best man gave a funny speech about how Stephen had pursued Lauren for months before she agreed to go out with him. The maid of honor talked about true love and happy endings. The guests laughed and applauded. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. And then it was my turn. The master of ceremonies announced that the bride's mother wanted to say a few words. He said it almost as if apologizing, as if it were an annoying but necessary obligation. Lauren got tense in her chair. She wasn't expecting this. We had talked before, and I had told her that I was too shy to give a public speech, that I preferred not to. But I had changed my mind at the last minute. I had told the event coordinator that same afternoon that I wanted to speak, that I had something special to share with the newlyweds on their special day. I got up from my table. I walked to the small stage with slow, deliberate steps. I could feel all eyes on me. The poor mother in her invisible grey dress, climbing onto the stage where moments before elegant and eloquent people had been. I took the microphone with hands that didn't tremble. I took a deep breath. I looked directly at Lauren. Her eyes showed confusion and some alarm. Stephen looked bored, probably expecting a sentimental and brief speech from a foolish mother. I started to speak. My voice sounded stronger than I expected, clearer, firmer. I said that I was very excited to be there, that seeing my daughter get married was something I had dreamed of for years, that I had been waiting for this moment since she was a little girl playing weddings with her dolls. I paused. The guests were smiling. This sounded like a normal maternal speech. Then I said that I wanted to tell them a story, the story of a mother who gave everything for her daughter, who worked cleaning bathrooms and scrubbing floors to pay for her education, who went without eating many nights to make sure her daughter had everything she needed, who gave up her own dreams so that her daughter could achieve hers. The smiles began to fade. This no longer sounded like a typical speech. Lauren was completely rigid in her chair, her knuckles white, clutching the edge of the table. I continued. I said that this mother had believed that love was enough, that if you gave yourself completely, you would be valued, appreciated, loved in return. My voice broke slightly as I said this. It wasn't acting. It was real pain seeping through my mask of calm. I said that this mother had been wrong, that she had recently discovered that her daughter didn't love her, that in fact her daughter considered her an embarrassment, a problem, something that had to be gotten rid of. The room was completely silent now. You could hear the collective breathing of 200 people. Lauren had turned pale. Stephen was looking at her, not understanding what was happening. Then I took the papers out of my purse. I held them up so everyone could see them. And I said that I had evidence of everything I was claiming, that I was not a bitter mother making up stories. I was a mother who had finally opened her eyes. Lauren's perfect world was about to collapse, and I had my finger on the self-destruct button. The silence in that room was absolute. 200 people holding their breath. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on me. The invisible mother who had suddenly become impossible to ignore. Lauren tried to get up from her chair, but Stephen stopped her, grabbing her arm. He was probably thinking that this was just the confused speech of an emotional old woman, that it would pass quickly, that they could laugh about this later. They had no idea what was coming. I raised the papers higher, and my voice became firmer. I said that 3 weeks before this beautiful wedding, my dear daughter had asked me to sign some documents, that she told me they were simple formalities, boring legal stuff related to her change in marital status. I paused. I let the tension build. Then I continued. I said that those documents were not formalities. They were a power of attorney that gave Lauren total control over my house, my savings, every cent I had. She was basically asking me to hand over everything her father and I had built over decades of hard work. Some guests gasped. Others began to murmur. Stephen's family looked at each other with expressions of confusion and growing alarm. Lauren finally found her voice. She got up and yelled that it wasn't true, that I was confused, that I was misunderstanding everything. Her voice sounded desperate, hysterical. She was no longer the elegant and controlled bride. She was someone watching her world begin to fall apart. I ignored her completely. I continued speaking as if she hadn't said anything. I explained that when I refused to sign those papers, Lauren got incredibly angry, that she stopped talking to me for 2 weeks, that she only contacted me again when she needed to confirm my attendance at this wedding. I said that I had found that behavior strange, that a mother tends to notice when something is not right with her daughter. So I decided to investigate a little more. I took another document out of my purse. This one was a bank statement. I showed it to the public, although it was too far away for them to read the details. I explained that during the 4 years Lauren was in college, I spent exactly $42,000 on her education. Tuition, books, apartment, food, everything. $42,000 that I earned cleaning houses, scrubbing floors, working until my back screamed with pain and my hands bled. My voice trembled as I said this. The pain was too real, too present. I continued by saying that Lauren graduated 7 years ago, that she started working earning $60,000 annually, an excellent salary for a recent graduate, a salary that grew year after year until it reached the $90,000 she earns now. Stephen's parents looked tense. This information clearly didn't sit well with them. I asked the audience, rhetorically, how much money they thought Lauren had given me during those 7 years to help me, to give me back even a fraction of what I had invested in her. I let the silence answer. Then I said the number. 0. Not a single dollar, not even when she knew that I was still working in my 60s because I didn't have enough to retire. Not even when my knees started to fail me, and every step was agony. Lauren screamed again. She said that I never asked her for help, that if she had known I needed it, of course she would have helped me. Her voice sounded shrill, desperate. This time I looked at her directly, and I smiled. A cold smile I never thought I would be capable of forming. I said that she was right, that I never asked her for help, because mothers shouldn't have to beg their children for the basics, because I foolishly believed that love meant caring without being asked. Then I took out my most powerful weapon, the small recording device. I explained that the night before Lauren had come to my house, that we had had a very revealing conversation, a conversation that, fortunately, I had recorded. Lauren's face lost all colour. Stephen was looking at her, still not understanding the magnitude of the disaster. I asked the event's sound technician to connect my device to the room's audio system. Samuel had arranged this in advance, discreetly bribing the technician that same afternoon. The speakers crackled. And then Lauren's voice filled the room, her voice saying that I was a problem to solve, that she couldn't let me ruin her new life, that Stephen's family moved in circles where appearances mattered, and I, with my cheap dresses and my country manners, was an embarrassment. Stephen's parents went stiff. Other family members began to murmur in indignation. But the recording continued, Lauren's voice explaining how they planned to sell my house and use my money for Stephen's business, how they would send me to a residence far from the city so I wouldn't bother them. And then came the most devastating part. Her voice saying that I was a pathetic old woman, that she had pretended to love me only because it was convenient for her, that for years she had used me because she needed my support, my money, my house. but that she didn't need me anymore. Every word was a blow, not just for me, for everyone who was listening. I could see the expressions of horror, disgust, and complete disbelief on the faces of the guests. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Lauren was standing by her table, trembling. Tears were streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Stephen had let go of her and had taken a step back, as if she were something toxic. Stephen's mother got up. Her face was a mask of contained fury. She said something in a low voice to her husband. Then they started walking toward the exit. Other members of their family followed. The guests began to get up. Some came up to me with expressions of sympathy. Others simply left, uncomfortable with the drama they had just witnessed. Some took out their phones, probably to share this story that would be the talk of the town for months. Lauren tried to approach Stephen's family. She tried to explain, to apologize, to fix the mess. But they ignored her completely. For them, she had just revealed her true nature, and that nature was unacceptable. Stephen was frozen in place. His perfect wedding, his carefully built reputation, his planned future, all destroyed in a matter of minutes. But I wasn't finished yet. I took the microphone one more time, my voice cut through the growing chaos. I said that there was one last thing everyone needed to know, that this same week I had put my house in an irrevocable trust, that I had changed my will, that every cent I had, every possession, would go to a foundation that helps elderly women who are victims of family abuse. I looked directly at Lauren as I said this. I said that she would receive nothing, absolutely nothing, that I had spent 69 years giving without receiving. But that ended today. Lauren collapsed. She literally fell to the floor, her $1,000 dress wrinkled under her, sobbing uncontrollably. And I simply left the microphone on the stage, picked up my purse, and walked toward the exit with my head held high. For the first time in my life, I was the one leaving, the one taking control, the one deciding when the story ended. Samuel was waiting for me at the entrance to the room. He offered me his arm, and I took it. We walked together toward the parking lot while the chaos continued behind us. I could hear shouts, crying, the growing murmur of 200 people processing what they had just witnessed. I didn't look back, not even once. In the car, Samuel asked me how I felt. I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel the satisfaction I had expected. I didn't feel triumph. I only felt a huge emptiness where my daughter had once been. An emptiness that hurt more than I thought possible. But I also felt something else. Something new. Freedom. He took me to his office even though it was a Saturday night. He said there were some final details we needed to go over. Documents to sign. Decisions to make about my future now that I had completely cut ties with my past. We sat in his office with a view of the illuminated city. He poured me a coffee that I didn't drink, and he explained exactly what I had achieved with my public exposure. Legally, I was protected. My house, my savings, everything was out of Lauren's reach. The trust was irrevocable. The will, sealed and registered. There was no way she could claim anything. But there was more. Samuel had discreetly circulated copies of the documents and the recording to several social journalists who were covering the wedding. By the next morning, the story would be in all the local media. The bride who tried to dispossess her mother. The Correa family scandal. Lauren's reputation was destroyed. Her marriage, probably too. Stephen came from a family that valued image above all else. They would not tolerate being associated with this type of scandal. Samuel told me all this in a neutral, professional tone, but I could see the approval in his eyes. He had seen many cases of family abuse in his career. He rarely saw victims defend themselves so effectively. I asked him what would happen now, what would come after this. He explained that Lauren would probably try to contact me, that the stage of pleas, of promises, of desperate attempts to fix what she had broken would come. He warned me that I had to be prepared to stand firm, that I couldn't let her manipulate me again. I assured him that would not happen, that the Sarah who let herself be manipulated had died in that restaurant the day I heard that conversation. The one that was left was someone different, someone stronger. Samuel took out another document. This one was different. It was a sales contract. For my house. He explained that he had found an interested buyer, a young couple who had just had their first baby. They were offering a fair price, above the market value. The money would be enough for me to move to a better, smaller, more manageable place for someone my age. I looked at the document for a long time. That house was the last thing that connected me to Robert, to the memories of when Lauren was a child and we were happy. Selling it meant completely closing that chapter. But it also meant freedom. It meant not living anymore in a museum of painful memories. It meant starting over. I signed the contract with a steady hand. Samuel smiled. He told me he was proud of me, that not many people my age had the courage to start from scratch, that I was stronger than I thought. I left his office after midnight. The city was quiet. I took a taxi back to my house, that house that would soon no longer be mine. When I went in, everything looked different. The furniture I had known for decades now seemed to belong to someone else, to another life. The photographs on the walls showed a family that no longer existed. I sat on the sofa, where Robert used to watch television, where Lauren used to do her homework, and for the first time since all of this began, I cried. I didn't cry because of what I had done. I didn't regret exposing Lauren in front of everyone. She deserved to face the consequences of her actions. I cried for what I had lost, for the daughter I never really had, for the wasted years believing in a love that only existed in my imagination, for the family I thought we had. But that was just an illusion. I cried until there were no more tears left, and then I got up, washed my face, and started packing. I had 2 weeks before the house was officially the new owner's. 2 weeks to decide what I would take with me to my new life and what I would leave behind. The decision was easier than I expected. I would take very little. The necessary clothes, some books, the photographs of Robert, because despite everything, those memories were real and valuable. But nothing of Lauren. Not a single photograph of her. Not a single memory of who she turned out to be. The rest I would donate or sell. Furniture, dishes, decorations, everything that filled this house with ghosts of the past. During those 2 weeks, my phone rang constantly. Lauren called again and again. She left desperate voice messages, crying, pleading, promising that it had been a misunderstanding, that she loved me, that she would please give her a chance to explain. I never answered. I never replied. I blocked her number after the 5th day. I also received calls from other people, neighbors expressing their support, former co-workers telling me I had done the right thing. Even some of the people who had been at the wedding contacted me to tell me they admired my courage. The story had gone viral on social media. Someone had recorded part of my speech with their phone. The video had millions of views. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Women my age sharing similar stories of ungrateful children. Young people saying they would never treat their parents that way. Lauren and Stephen were now infamous, a laughingstock of the city. His marriage had lasted exactly 3 hours before Stephen's parents demanded an immediate annulment. Part of me felt sorry for her, but it was an increasingly smaller part, a part that was shrinking more with each passing day. because I finally understood something fundamental. I hadn't done this to Lauren. She had done it to herself. I had only exposed the truth. The consequences were hers to face, and I had my own life to focus on now. A life that was just beginning. 3 months after the wedding, I moved into a small apartment in another city, 2 hours away from everything I had known for 69 years, far from the memories, far from the scandal, far from Lauren. The apartment was modest but bright. It had a small balcony where I could have coffee in the mornings and watch the sunrise. There was a park nearby where I walked every afternoon. There was a library 3 blocks away where I spent hours reading books I had never had time to read before. For the first time in my life, I was living alone, not for a husband, not for a daughter, just for me. At first, it was terrifying. I would wake up in the mornings not knowing what to do with so much free time, with no one to worry about, with no one whose needs I put before my own. But slowly, very slowly, I learned to enjoy it. I started taking painting classes at a community centre. I discovered that I had a talent for landscapes. My hands, those hands that had scrubbed floors for decades, were now creating beauty. I made friends with other women my age, women who had also gone through painful divorces, devastating losses, family betrayals. We would meet on Thursdays for coffee and conversation. We shared our stories without judgment. We supported each other. One of them, Jessica, asked me one afternoon if I regretted what I had done, if I wished I had forgiven Lauren instead of exposing her so publicly. I thought about it for a long time before answering, because it was an important question, one I had asked myself many nights when I couldn't sleep. I told her that I didn't regret it, that forgiving doesn't mean allowing them to keep hurting you, that true love includes boundaries and consequences, that I had spent too many years being my daughter's emotional doormat, and that wasn't love. It was codependency disguised as maternal sacrifice. I told her that I finally understood that I hadn't done Lauren any favors by letting her treat me that way, that by never setting boundaries for her, by never demanding respect, I had turned her into someone capable of discarding people without remorse, and that maybe, just maybe, facing the consequences of her actions would help her become a better person. Or maybe not. But that was no longer my responsibility. Jessica hugged me. She told me I was the bravest woman she knew. I didn't feel brave. I just felt free. 6 months after moving, I received a letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Lauren. The letter was 12 pages long, 12 pages of apologies, explanations, justifications. She said that she had been in therapy, that she finally understood all the damage she had caused me, that Stephen had left her and she had lost her job because of the scandal, that she was living in a tiny apartment, struggling to pay the bills, facing the consequences of her decisions for the first time in her life. She said that she loved me, that she had always loved me, that she was just confused, influenced by Stephen and his family, blinded by ambition, that if she could go back in time, she would do everything differently. She asked for forgiveness. She begged for a second chance. She promised to be better. She promised to value me. She promised to show me that she could change. I read the letter 3 times. Every word was an echo of the past, of all the times I had fallen for her tears and promises, of all the times I had believed that this time would be different. But I was no longer that person. I was no longer the mother desperate for her daughter's love. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my peace for crumbs of affection. I carefully folded the letter. I put it in a drawer along with other things from the past that no longer defined me, and I never replied. Because some relationships cannot be repaired. Some betrayals are too deep, and that's okay. Not all stories have happy endings of reconciliation. Sometimes the happy ending is simply walking away, choosing yourself, living in peace. Today, I am 70 years old. I have been living in this city for almost a year. My paintings decorate the walls of my apartment. My friends come to visit me on Sundays. My days are calm, simple, mine. Sometimes, when I walk through the park at sunset, I think about everything that happened, about the woman I was before that afternoon at the restaurant, about how a single conversation heard by accident completely changed the course of my life. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't arrived early that day, if I hadn't heard the truth. I would probably still be the naive Sarah. I would probably be in some nursing home far from everything, believing that my daughter loved me while she enjoyed my house and my money. But I arrived early. I heard the truth, and I made a decision that saved my life. It wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Exposing my own daughter, breaking with the only family I had left, starting over from scratch at 69 years old. But it was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Because now, for the first time in my life, I am free. My name is no longer tied to Lauren's. My value does not depend on being a mother. My identity is not defined by how much I give to others. I am Sarah Miller, 70 years old, artist, friend, survivor. And my story doesn't end with an ungrateful daughter who betrayed me. My story is just beginning. Because it turns out it's never too late to blossom. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to close painful chapters and write new ones full of peace and dignity. To all the women who are reading this, who are maybe going through something similar, who feel like it's too late to change, to walk away, to start over, I say this. It's not too late. It is never too late. Your life belongs to you. Your peace matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And if you have to choose between being loved and being respected, always choose respect. Because love without respect isn't love, it's manipulation. I chose respect. I chose dignity. I chose peace, and I have never been happier. This is my story. The story of how I arrived early for a dinner and heard a conversation that changed everything. The story of how a 69-year-old mother found the courage to stand up for herself. The story of how one life ended and another began. And it's just the beginning.